make rock and roll, have a party, and have lots of fun.
Hello classic rock fans, I'm reporting a day after seeing AC/DC at Camp Randall Stadium in Madison, Wisconsin. This was the first AC/DC concert in Madison in 25 years, and the first AC/DC concert in Wisconsin in over 15 years, the last of which was at the old Bradley Center in Milwaukee in 2010, which was the last time I saw AC/DC. The first time I saw them was during a two-night stand at the Allstate Arena in Chicago. When they launched their Black Ice Tour in 2008, the second and third shows of the tour were both at the Allstate Arena in Chicago, and I got tickets to see both. It's one of only 2 times where I've seen the same band play a night or so after the other. The other time was at Summerfest, where I saw Steve Miller Band 2 nights in a row. Those shows at the Allstate Arena were phenomenal. The first night I was on the floor and my seat was right next to the elevated platform at the end of the walkway that would come out into the crowd. So I had the perfect view of Angus when he did his epic Let There Be Rock solo. The second night I was up in the stands, but it didn't matter where I was sitting. The music was so good and the band played so well that both of those were 2 of the best shows I've ever been to. Less than a year later, AC/DC came back to Chicago on that same tour, as did I. That was at the United Center in 2009. Once again, I was on the floor for that show, but the only problem with that was that I was in the very last row. So I had a center straight-on view of the stage, which was nice, but I was so far back that I had a hard time seeing parts of the show. That was unfortunate. But again, the show was so much fun that I didn't mind. And then just a year after that, still on the Black Ice Tour, I saw them finally come to Milwaukee, which is at the old Bradley Center in 2010. I went with some friends. My brother and my mom were actually at that show as well. It was so great to see them in my hometown, and once again they delivered an epic hard rocking concert. AC/DC is one of my absolute favorite bands. When I was a kid, they were my favorite band, and all 4 shows on the Black Ice Tour were among my very favorite concert memories. Now, after that last show, there were several points in time where I thought I would never get a chance to see AC/DC again. For starters, more than half the lineup that I saw on that Black Ice Tour have since left the band. And sadly, Malcolm Young, the heart and soul of the band, passed away. There was even a point where vocalist Brian Johnson had to step away from the band due to hearing loss. They wrapped up that tour with Axl Rose, and I was convinced the band was going to be more or less over at that point. Cliff Williams had retired, Malcolm Young had to step away from the band because of his health issues at that point, and Phil Rudd had some legal troubles. And I'll just leave it at that. So for several years I thought, well, AC/DC is over, I'm glad I got a chance to see them when I did. I'm glad I took all 4 opportunities I did when they were close to me. But then, during COVID, they returned with the surprise album called Power Up. And Brian was back in the band. His hearing issues had been figured out. Now, because it was COVID, they could release an album, but they couldn't tour to promote it. So it's only in the last couple of years that they've been on the road to tour to support Power Up. I think it started with that epic rock concert in California, Power Trip, and then they've been doing shows every year since then. This Power Up tour has been going on since 2024. But it's kind of funny to think that this might be the longest amount of time between an album release and a tour to support said album. But whatever the case, I'm just glad they made it out to Madison, Wisconsin, so I was able to make the drive over to see them. And if you're wondering about my setup here, no, Madison isn't so far away that I need a hotel to go see one of the shows. It's just that this week I'm going camping and I'm not headed back home, so I just wanted to record my initial thoughts the morning after the show before I go on my vacation. Okay, before I get to the set list, let me tell you a little bit about the pre-show activities. When I got into Madison, I first went over to a bar called the Annex on Regent Avenue, where they had an AC/DC Power Up pop-up shop. Basically a location for fans to gather, socialize, take some photos, and buy tour merch. I went there so I could skip the lines at the concert, and I got this shirt I'm wearing, plus this awesome magnet for my basement bar fridge, And I got some really cool photos there as well. They had these cool giant AC/DC letters up on a stage for fans to take a picture in front of. And I gotta say, I went by myself, but my fellow fans were very cool about taking some photos for me, which is much appreciated. I did the same for them, and it was just cool to see a lot of AC/DC fans together celebrating the music we all love. From there, I went to check into my hotel, and then it was right over to the venue. Camp Randall Stadium is, of course, where the Wisconsin Badgers play, and it's a bit of a task to get into. Felt like the whole city was going to this show, honestly. After standing in a line that could have been a lot worse, I got into the venue and went to my seat. Unfortunately, the sun was still cooking down, so I did not stay in my seat for the opening act. Instead, I watched them from the upper concourse. The opening act was the Pretty Reckless, and I gotta say, they were pretty good. It was because they had that great hard rockin' sound that AC/DC is known for, and it was a really good band to properly warm up the crowd. After their set, I went back down to my seat, and the show got started. And as soon as they started playing that opening hype video, I was transported back to that first time when I saw them in 2008. It was like that magic was back before those guys were even on stage. And of course, it was even better once they came out on stage because, like I said, I really thought that I was not going to have a chance to see them again. I thought that time had passed, but Brian and Angus are still rocking, and it was a great show. And I say Brian and Angus because it's always been the Brian and Angus show when AC/DC tours. That's how their tours are built. The rhythm section is very much meant to be heard but not seen necessarily. But at least in 2008, I knew the names of the guys in the rhythm section. This year was a little different. I know that Stevie Young, Angus's nephew, took over for Malcolm in his spot, but I didn't know the bass player or the drummer. That's not to say they did anything wrong. They were fantastic. They did exactly what they were supposed to do. But I don't have too much to say about them because of the design of AC/DC shows is, again, the rhythm section holds their position, and Brian and Angus are the stars of the show. And stars they were. People reacted really well to both of them, particularly Angus during his guitar solos. Despite the fact that he's now 71, he was still killing it and still brought that crazy energy that he's known for, which is just unbelievable at his age that he's still able to do all this stuff. So let's go through the set list. They opened with If You Want Blood, You Got It. Perfect song to open the show with. Great energy, and it really sets the tone for the whole night. Aside from Thunderstruck, that might be the best song in their catalog to open a concert with. Then you had Back in Black. For casual fans who might not have known that opening song, this is the one that got everybody who wasn't already on their feet up on their feet. And it kicked ass. And I can address right away the state of Brian's vocals. You know, Brian is in his late 70s, and I saw one of his contemporaries, David Lee Roth, just a month ago, who's about the same age, and his vocals are shot and have been shot for a long time. Now, Brian sounded great on the Black Ice tour, but it's been 15 years since then, and vocal issues don't typically get better, and he's had hearing loss issues. So I was bracing myself for basically weak moments from Brian. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but there really weren't any. He's still got some grit in his voice. There's still some tread on those vocal cords, and that's just amazing for someone at his age. Once I saw him tear through Back in Black, I knew I wouldn't be wincing at anything else through the rest of the night. After that was a song from PWRUP called Demon Fire. That's one of the best songs on the new album. I remember when that album came out, they went on comedian Dean Del Rey's podcast to promote it, and when Dean was talking about the album, he mentioned that Demon Fire was a favorite of his. And since I've heard the album, I would agree that is one of the best songs there. Another one I like is called Witch's Spell. Speaking of Dean Del Rey, this AC/DC concert is the second AC/DC show I've seen this year. Subscribers might remember in February I flew out to Los Angeles to see Dean Del Rey's Bon Scott tribute show. So very cool that 15 years after the last time I saw AC/DC, I get to see 2 AC/DC shows in the same year. After that was Shot Down in Flames, and then one of my favorite songs, Thunderstruck. I had seen some videos of AC/DC playing Thunderstruck in past concerts on this tour, and that was one I was a little worried about because I think that's the hardest of all their songs for Angus to play because of that relentless riff. And I was a little worried that he might struggle with that at this show, but I don't think he did. It was definitely a half a beat slower than when I've seen them in the past, but it still played really well. The crowd reacted like crazy, and it was definitely one of the high points of the show. And that was the only song I noticed, at least, that they had to slow down for a little bit. The only one where I felt that Angus was really pushing it to get through. The only song that Brian struggled a bit on was You Shook Me All Night Long, but we'll get to that. Right after Thunderstruck was Have a Drink on Me. They didn't play Have a Drink on Me during the Black Ice tour, and that was a shame because that is another one of my all-time favorite AC/DC songs. So seeing them play it at this show was a real treat, and definitely one of the highlights for me. And then Hell's Bells, another absolutely epic track from their catalog, and another one where the fans reacted like crazy once they heard that bell ring. At the start of the song, they of course lowered the bell, they have, and they did that in the Black Ice tour, and I think they've done that every tour since Back in Black. That's one of their most iconic stage props. I'm glad it's still part of the show because I'll say this, one of the only downers about this show is that the stage props and even the video production has gone down a bit since I saw them on the Black Ice tour. There was no giant inflatable Rosie. There was no like massive train structure on the stage or whatever the PWRUP equivalent would be. And that's too bad because those elements really do add to a show. Another thing that adds to a show is fun video or animations on the video screens. I was really surprised at how minimal this stuff on the video screens were. And a lot of the times the video screens had this split screen effect that did not look really all that cool. And I just felt like the production was the only thing that held this show back a little bit. That kind of stuff goes a long way, particularly with stadium shows. And that's what AC/DC is. They're a stadium band. So I was a little disappointed that the video production for the video screens was a little weak and that they reduced the on-stage props, which in past shows were always a lot of fun. After Hell's Bells was the lead-off single for PWRUP, A Shot in the Dark. And I'll tell you, this was probably the only low point of the show for me. And it wasn't a bad moment, it's just that that song isn't very good. A Shot in the Dark beats A Walk in the Park. Ugh, I don't know. And I don't think I'm the only one when I say that because, of course, being that it was a new song and not instantly recognizable, I could see from my vantage point that people were going in droves to either the bathroom or the beer stand. And then after that was Stiff Upper Lip, which surprised me. I didn't expect to hear that one. That's not a song I rate very highly, but it's also not a song I have really strong feelings about one way or another. I was just surprised to see it in the set list. But having it right after A Shot in the Dark, that was definitely a lull in the show, and also the moment where I noticed that people around me started to sit down. For the rest of the show, given the age of the crowd, there was a lot of sitting down and then standing up, sitting down and then standing up, because where I was seated there was definitely some older folks who were on their feet for a long time. This was a long show, so people were definitely getting tired at points. But after that, we just have this marathon of killer tracks. Highway to Hell, Shoot to Thrill, Sin City, Jailbreak, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and High Voltage. Any AC/DC fan knows all of those songs. Those are all killer, no filler tracks. And that was probably the best stretch of the whole show, at least for me. I was really enjoying it. And I was also really happy that they didn't save Highway to Hell for the Encore or the finale. That song absolutely works in the middle of the set list, and again, after this little lull of songs that weren't necessarily recognizable to everybody in the crowd, Highway to Hell got everybody right back on their feet, singing along, raising the devil horns, all that great stuff that you want to see at an AC/DC concert. And when they got to Jailbreak, I remember hearing someone behind me go, "Oh man, I love this song." Like he was surprised to hear it. And I wasn't surprised to hear it because I had cheated and looked at the set list, but I wanted to turn around and say, "Hell yeah, man, I'm right there with you." Because yes, that is absolutely killer. One of the best songs from the Bon Scott years. And on that point, I'm glad to say, as always, AC/DC is doing a really good job of representing the Bon Scott years in their concerts. They don't do anything to recognize Bon on screen. That, again, is another missed opportunity. I wish they did, do something to salute Bon, if only for a moment during those shows, but a lot of bands seem to have that problem with members of theirs who've passed away. Now, when they got to High Voltage, that was one of the highlights of the show for me because that might be my favorite Bon Scott song. But this is where the crowd disappointed me because I think a lot of people at this show weren't familiar with High Voltage, and that was surprisingly a song that I noticed a lot of people sitting down for or spacing out for. And that was blowing my mind because I was like, are you guys not seeing this? This is one of their best songs. What is going on here? And I guess there was a bit of a disconnect between me and the rest of the audience because I absolutely love High Voltage. That to me is one of their signature songs. It's like their breakthrough song from that first album. So I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm a diehard AC/DC fan and there were definitely some more casual fans in the audience, and maybe that early stuff doesn't hit as hard for them as it does to me. But I was definitely a little caught off guard by how seemingly disinterested parts of the crowd were for that one. After that was Riff Raff, which, again, the same people who were spaced out and not really paying attention for High Voltage stayed that way through Riff Raff. So I hate to say it, but this was another sort of lull for the crowd at this show. Not for me. I love those songs, but the people around me, the energy I could tell was definitely starting to go down. But it was also getting kind of late in the night at this point. And again, like I said, this show was long, so I could tell a lot of people were just getting tired. And then we get to the finale part of the show. You Shook Me All Night Long, Whole Lotta Rosie, and Let There Be Rock. You Shook Me All Night Long got everybody back up on their feet. Whole Lotta Rosie was a great sing-along for the crowd. And Let There Be Rock is an epic track that is presented in a frankly ridiculous manner. It's not just that they play the song, it's that Angus does his solo for the show, which takes like 15 or 20 minutes after the rest of the band leaves the stage. Like, they play Let There Be Rock like normal, and then the whole band leaves the stage for Angus to do this absolutely over-the-top, super indulgent guitar solo, where he walks all the way down the walkway, gets out to the point, plays to 3 different parts of the crowd, gets on the platform in the center of that point. The platform goes up, where he's playing guitar, falls down on his side, does the whole Curly from the Three Stooges spin around on the floor bit, confetti shoots off, and you think, oh wow, how great, this must be over now. Nope, we're just getting started. The platform lowers down, he runs back to the stage, plays a little bit more by the drum set, and you think, oh okay, now this is where he ends. Nope. He then runs up the staircase, goes to a platform that hasn't been used in the show yet, and then you think, okay, this must be where he ends the solo. Nope. Now he's starting a whole new solo that involves some call and response from the audience, and that goes on for a couple of minutes. But he comes back down the staircase, the rest of the band finally comes out on stage, and then they end the song. Please post in the comments if I'm wrong on this, but I believe this is the single most indulgent guitar solo in rock history. Is there another band that spends as much time and effort on a single guitar solo in a concert setting? And I'm not talking about like a Joe Satriani instrumental piece where the whole song is him just doing a solo. No, I mean an established song that already has its solo in it, And that solo is extended out for as long as Angus does with Let There Be Rock. I don't think there is, at least not in classic rock, because I've seen a large number of classic rock bands, and I've seen my fair share of extended guitar solos, but nobody comes close to going as long as Angus Young does on Let There Be Rock. Now, am I complaining about any of this? Hell no. I remember this from Black Ice, and it was epic and fun then as it was now. But I can definitely appreciate more casual fans in the audience maybe thinking, what in the hell is he doing? How is this still going on? I did notice there were a couple of people who were leaving the show during this solo, but again, I've seen AC/DC before, so I knew this was coming. I was surprised that he didn't cut this part of the show down. This must be Angus's favorite part of the show, or at least the part of the show he's most proud of, because he puts so much effort into it, and he doesn't leave anything on the stage once that's done. So props to him for that. That is truly epic. And then once that was done, they came out for the Encore, which was TNT, and for those about to rock, they brought out the cannons, and that is always epic. Speaking of cannons, one of the cool things I saw at that pop-up shop earlier in the day was one of the cannons from their iconic Castle Donington show was on display outside of the venue. That's one of my favorite concert movies of all time. That live album is pretty much what made me an AC/DC fan, so getting to see that in person was really cool. And then that song concludes with a bunch of cannon shots out into the crowd, which I read a headline this morning that said some people at the show were caught off guard by or a little surprised by the noise. I would assume anyone who knows anything about AC/DC knows that that part of the show is coming, but what do I know? And that was a wrap on one of the best shows I've seen all decade, maybe my favorite show of the year. I think when 2026 is all said and done, it's going to be close between Triumph and AC/DC, and frankly, Dean Del Rey's Bon Scott show. Like, 2026 has been a great year for concerts for me already, and I still have some crazy good shows coming up too. But even with all that, I love AC/DC so much that this very well could have been the best show I saw all year. It's already one of my favorite concerts of the 2020s, at least. A couple other notes, not terribly important, but Brian talked to the crowd quite a bit, but because of his levels on the mic or wherever his mic was in the mix, when he sang I could hear him all right, but when he talked, I could barely hear anything, and I'd be surprised if anyone in the audience could really hear him all that well either. Which is too bad, because Brian is, of course, very funny. But there were some points where he talked to the crowd for, more than just a second, and I would have liked to have heard it, but for whatever reason, just didn't come through all that clear. I could hear him say the word cheesehead a couple of times.
I want to be a cheesehead so bad.
And that's something he loves to bring up when he comes to Wisconsin. You can listen to bootlegs of him here in Wisconsin in the past, and when I saw him at the Bradley Center, he said something about cheeseheads. Because we're Packer fans, and Packer fans wear cheeseheads at games, and that's one of those things where you just know that one of his handlers told him about it, and he loved it, so every time he plays Wisconsin, he's got to mention the cheeseheads. But you know what? I appreciate that. I appreciate that quite a bit, even if he's never seen a single Packer game. Okay, here's something that I can say, because I'm bald. Did Angus get his hair fixed? Did he make that trip to Turkey? I know this is kind of a shitty thing to bring up, but again, as a bald guy, I notice these things. In 2008, I couldn't help but notice he had a lot more scalp showing at those shows, and even at the time I remember thinking, man, is he going to have to go the Chris Slade route eventually and shave his hair totally down and do the cue ball look? But apparently not, because at this show, he didn't have a full head of hair, but it was pretty thick up top, which was not the case in 2008. If this is shitty to say, sorry, it's just a funny thing that I noticed. And I think that's it. Despite my goofy observations, let me be as clear as I can. This is one of the best shows I've seen this year, this decade. AC/DC, I cannot believe how strong they are still performing at this stage of the game. Again, Brian Johnson is in his late 70s. Angus Young is 71, but how many 71-year-olds do you know that can do this kind of crazy shit on stage? Can't imagine there's a whole lot. So I am, again, absolutely impressed by how strong those guys are still performing this deep into their career. I would assume this is their last tour because they don't tour regularly, but who knows, you know? I think they're still having fun. I think they still love doing it. I hope they can continue doing whatever they're doing on this tour for maybe another year or so, because it seems to be working for them. And if it's working now, why slow it down? But we'll see. If this was the last time I ever got to see AC/DC, that'll be just fine with me, because they went out, for me, on a very strong note. And I love that. So, awesome show. If they're playing your local football stadium, yeah, go see them. This could be your last time, and it is a great show. It'll be a lot of fun, so I highly recommend it. But I've gone on for quite a while now. I got to be getting on the road, so I'm going to call it here. Thank you very much for watching this review. Please check out some of the other reviews I've done on this channel. If you're a fan of classic rock, I've definitely reviewed a concert from a band or artist that you're a fan of. And if you are that fan of classic rock, please check out the podcast I do. It's all about classic rock. We've got a lot of great guests on this year and a lot of fun stuff coming down the road, so stay tuned for that. If you attended this AC/DC concert or seen them recently, please tell me what you thought in the comments below. But with that, thanks again for watching this video. Go see AC/DC and keep rocking. Oi!